Frank Miller killed the lights in Miller's auto at 4 o'clock p.m. sharp, exactly as he had every Valentine's Day since Birch Creek could remember. The neon service sign fizzled to black, leaving only dusk's pink haze slanting through dust-striped windows. Locals had crafted small-town myths around the ritual. Some insisted Frank mourned a long-lost sweetheart. Others swore he nursed shell-shock ghosts with cheap whiskey. No one dared ask. He was just the quiet mechanic who resurrected tractors and school buses through Midwestern winters. But this year, the ritual cracked. Minutes after closing, the bell above the office door jangled. A petite, rain-soaked woman stepped inside, clutching a flat canvas parcel. Frank's lungs stalled. Stitched in a corner were 3 letters in dried blood thread. FF 116. In an instant, the garage's scent of diesel and pine cleaner dissolved into memories of the Orne River, dynamite wax, and the tremor of a plunger beneath 23-year-old fingers. "Excuse me, Mr. Miller," she said in careful English, setting the parcel on the counter. "I have carried this since the night you saved us." She untied the twine. Inside lay a 1944 paratrooper's map, edges scorched and punctured by bullet holes, a penciled route labeled Sabotage Bridge 17. Frank's normally steady hands shook as they hadn't in 81 years. He hadn't seen or spoken the codename Foxfire 116 since the eve of D-Day. Yet here it was, stitched in canvas, demanding his silence finally break. Frank untied the last knot as though lifting a tourniquet from a wound long cauterized. Under fluorescent shoplight, the map revealed more than topography. Coffee-brown stains where Normandy rain mixed with blood, frantic French scrawls, Pont à démolir, charge 20 key, Hur 0217, and, near the margin, a single thumbprint preserved in faded crimson. Frank's heart lurched. That print belonged to Captain Henri Renard Fontaine, Maquis leader, the man who had sworn none of them would leave Bridge 17 alive if the charges failed. 81 years melted in a blink. Frank felt the June mist clinging to his collar again, heard hedge road darkness rumble with German half-tracks, smelled cordite and wet canvas. At 23, he'd been Foxfire 116, an American sapper borrowed by the French resistance to delay the 21st Panzer for 4 vital hours on D-Day's -1. With him that night, 7 French partisans and a rucksack of Nobel 808. The visitor cleared her throat. "I am Elise Fontaine, Henri's sister." From her coat she produced a rusted cartridge box and eased it open. Inside lay 7 dented French francs and a faded tricolor ribbon. Frank's breath hitched. Those francs had jingled in Henri's pocket as he wired pylons. Each coin marked a volunteer ready to die if dawn never came. Elise's voice trembled. "Henri wrote to your family. He never posted the letter. He believed Foxfire 116 would return for this map when all debts were paid." She lifted a folded sheet. U.S. Army Stationery. Salutation typed to the family of PFC Frank Miller, body still blank. Only a penciled note in French, Il est revenu. He came back. Frank's fingers, oil steady for half a century, now shook. "I buried that code name the night the bridge collapsed," he rasped. "Figured the world was safer not knowing." Elise traced the map's char line. "Histories fade when tongues do, Monsieur Miller, but promises don't." Clock hands clicked to 4:17 p.m., the same minute he'd set the timer fuse in 1944. In that mechanical heartbeat, Frank heard Henri's last command. "If dawn arrives, make it count." He straightened, spine creaking like old rifle bolts. "Bridge 17 is rubble," he said, voice steadier than his hands. "The debt isn't." He locked the shop door, flipped the closed sign, and for the first time in 8 decades prepared to finish a mission that never really ended. The flight from Chicago to Paris took 8 hours. For Frank Miller, it felt like one long pulse of rotor wash and tracer fire. Each time cabin lights dimmed, He saw the Orne River boiling beneath a collapsing trestle, felt gravel bite his knees as he crawled through cattails with a detonator clutched to his chest. Elise dozed beside him, the cartridge box swaddled in a scarf on her lap. Frank kept a hand on its lid, anchoring himself to the present whenever the fuselage groaned like distant artillery. At Charles de Gaulle, reporters lay in wait, tipped off by a leaked manifest reading, "American Saboteur returns to Normandy." Elise hustled Frank through a side exit to a battered Peugeot. Their driver, a gray-bearded Maquis descendant, offered a silent salute before gunning west onto the A13. Beyond the urban sprawl, Normandy unfurled. Rapeseed fields blazing gold, hedgerows like green ramparts. Frank rolled the window down. The wind smelled of loam and tractor diesel, but beneath it lingered the phantom scent of cordite and rain-wet wool. They reached Saint-Étienne-du-Val by dusk. The rebuilt Bridge 17 arched gracefully over a calm stream, lit by amber lamps. Yet Frank's eyes leapt upstream to a tangle of moss-choked pilings, what remained of the original span. In his mind, the girders still shrieked, smoke clawing at night sky while German spotlights searched the dark for ghosts. Mayor Leclerc greeted them outside the mairie, gripping a folder of forms. Insurance waivers, speech drafts, press credentials. Frank signed nothing. "Tomorrow's your story," the mayor insisted, brandishing a press itinerary. Frank shook his head. "Tomorrow is theirs," he said, nodding toward a choir of middle schoolers rehearsing La Marseillaise. That night, Elise guided him to her family's farmhouse, untouched since 1947. In the attic, under moth-eaten quilts, lay a rusted Beretta, a resistance armband, and dog tags stamped Miller F. T42 05394, lost during his sprint from the bridge. Henri must have found them, keeping them safe for a day that never seemed to arrive. Frank's knuckles whitened around the tags, metal as cold as the Orne on that June night. Elise poured 2 fingers of Calvados, handed Frank a glass. "2 absences filled," she toasted. Frank raised the tags, metal glinting off an attic bulb. "And to debts cleared," he replied. As the farmhouse settled into creaking silence, he realized the real detonation wouldn't be yesterday's dynamite, but tomorrow's truth, shrapnel of memory finally allowed to strike daylight. Morning fog drifted off the river like breath from an old wound as volunteers erected folding chairs along the water. Frank watched from a second-floor window of the mairie, buttoning a borrowed blazer whose cuffs still smelled faintly of axle grease. On a desk lay Mayor Leclerc's scripted remarks, polished heroics, elegant French metaphors, but Frank could not force the paper to match the raw iron in his memory. Instead, he slid the speech beneath a blotter, pocketed Henri's ribbon, and lifted the wooden case that held the new plaque. At 8 o'clock, a brass quartet struck up La Marseillaise in minor key, horns trembling in the chill. Frank descended the marble stairs with Elise at his elbow. School children in tricolor sashes lined the path, whispering, pointing at the stooped American, whose legend their teachers had recited like folklore. Frank's throat tightened. He had once crawled through mud beside boys not much older than these. Mayor Leclerc's introduction washed over him. "Courage incomparable, silent guardian of dawn." When the mayor beckoned, Frank stepped to the microphone, the plaque like a satchel charge cradled against his ribs. He scanned faces, tourists, veterans in berets, a BBC lens glinting. He found the choir's smallest singer, a girl clutching sheet music with shaking hands. Speak to her, he thought. "I'm no hero," he began, voice coarse. "Heroes are names carved in stone by people who showed up late. I was early with dynamite." Murmurs rippled, then stilled. Bridge 17 mattered because children deserved to wake under sun, not steel. 7 francs bought that morning, cheap price unless you were the one paying interest every night since. Elise stepped forward, opening the wooden case. Sunlight struck the bronze. 7 melted coins fused into an oval, dents preserved like battle scars. Frank raised it high. The crowd hushed. These francs are yours now. Spend them in laughter. Spend them in questions. Never spend them in silence. He lowered the plaque onto its granite pedestal. A gust off the river rattled the scaffolding as if testing the new memorial's resolve. Applause thundered, but Frank heard only the oar's steady whisper beneath. As cameras flashed, he laid Henri's tricolor ribbon across the plaque's edge. A private salute. For the first time in 8 decades, the weight of an unfinished promise eased from his shoulders, replaced by something lighter, almost frightening, the freedom to remember out loud. The moment Frank stepped away from the microphone, the crowd surged like surf chasing a retreating tide. Reporters shoved boom mics forward, camera drones buzzed overhead, and Mayor Leclerc's curated dignity dissolved into flashbulb chaos. A CNN producer thrust a release form. "Mr. Miller, a quick exclusive. How does it feel to change history?" Frank's jaw set. "I didn't change history. I bought it time." He tried to slip past, but a TikTok influencer blocked him, phone already streaming. "Sir, 20 seconds for our Legends of WW2 reel?" Elise slid between them, accent crisp as shattered glass. He spoke after 81 years. He won't be boiled down to 20 seconds. She guided Frank toward the river's edge. Applause pulsed behind them, but on the bank only river murmur persisted. Frank braced his palms against the railing, cool iron, freshly painted. Across the stream, children chased each other among wildflowers, oblivious to the minefields that once lurked beneath. Elise pressed Henri's ribbon into Frank's hand. "Media hunts medals, not ghosts," she whispered. Frank managed a brittle smile. "Let them hunt. Ghosts travel light." A young boy approached, Mark, the mayor's nephew, clutching a model of Bridge 17 crafted from popsicle sticks and fishing line. His voice trembled. "Sir, did you really hold the plunger?" Frank crouched, knees popping. "I held a promise," he said, fingers tracing the fragile trestles of Mark's model. "Bridges don't fall by accident. They fall for someone's tomorrow." Mark stared, eyes wide. In that gaze, Frank recognized a farm boy sapper who once believed dynamite could mend the world. Behind them, a BBC reporter called out, "Softer now." "Just one photograph, Mr. Miller. Promise it's respectful." Elise nodded. "One photograph, but the boy stands with him." The flash popped. A weather-lined mechanic beside a child who had just inherited daylight. That image ricocheted across the internet before sunset, captioned, "Silence finally speaks." Frank frowned at the viral echo, but didn't delete it. "If they must share something," he murmured, "let them share a kid learning why a bridge matters." Yet beneath the calm, unease coiled. Attention breeds excavation, and excavation unearths things meant to stay buried, like the rusted bunker of Nobel 808, still hidden beneath Wind Turbine 3's shadow on the old river road. 2 dawns after the ceremony, a construction crew arrived to widen the service track beneath Wind Turbine 3. Their backhoe's bucket bit into mud, struck metal, and spat sparks. The foreman froze, slid from the cab, and stared at the jagged shard protruding like a rusted rib. US C3 explosive, 1944. Within an hour, red tape ringed the site, and Mayor Leclerc's phone burned with calls from Paris Ordnance Command and panicked insurance agents. Elise reached Frank in Birch Creek by 4 a.m. local time. Wind rattled the phone line as she whispered, "They uncovered your contingency cash." Frank steadied the receiver, mind leaping to that rain-soaked night when Henri had insisted on burying surplus charges for tomorrow's tyrants. Frank had argued. Henri won. Now tomorrow had come. He landed in Normandy 36 hours later, stepping from the hire car into a field of whirring blades. Each turbine sliced the sky with a low whomp whomp that reminded Frank of distant gun turrets. A line of gendarmes tried to bar his path, but Dr. Amélie Vidal, an explosives historian from Caen, waved them off. She greeted Frank with a brisk handshake. "I read your fuse diagrams. They were artistry, monsieur." He gave a rueful grunt. Art belongs in galleries, not in mud. The crate lay half-exposed like a coffin, lid buckled but intact. Dr. Vidal's thermal probe confirmed the worst. Wax-soaked twine fuses had remained dry in their earth cocoon, still married to 80-year-old blasting caps. One wrong jostle and the entire wind farm could vanish in a fireball, taking the village power grid with it. Paris wanted the Army EOD team. Frank shook his head. "Modern teams cut wires. These fuses are guts and instinct. Let me do it." They cleared a 300-meter perimeter. Elise pressed Mark's tablet into Frank's gloved hand. "For archive," she said. "Never for YouTube." He winked. "Good." Kneeling in mud, he peeled wax from twine, each strand whispering of 1944 hedgerows. He snipped caps in the sequence Henri had drilled into his bones: red wire, blue, yellow ground. With the final cut, the crate exhaled a smell like old fireworks. 8 decades of tension bled into Normandy air and vanished. Dr. Vidal logged the ordnance as rendered inert. Frank tagged the crate for museum disposal in rows, knees crackling. Overhead, turbine blades swept sunlight into clean power. "One bridge saved Europe for a dawn," he muttered to Elise, wiping mud from his palms. "These blades feed it every dawn. I'd call that fair interest." Elise slipped Henri's ribbon back into his pocket. "And what do we do with debt finally paid?" Frank glanced at the towering turbines, listened to their steady cadence. "We let the world collect its own daylight. Then we rest." June 5th, 1944, 23:47. Rain knifed through the Normandy dark, flattening wheat and drowning the moon. Frank, then Private First Class Miller, crawled under Bridge 17 with Captain Henri Renard Fontaine at his shoulder. The Orne River foamed below, swollen by spring melt, black as stove oil. Across the water, German searchlights swept the embankment like angry ghosts, but fog swallowed their beams before they reached the trestles. Frank's satchel held 12 blocks of Nobel 808, wax sweating in the wet cold. He wedged putty against girders, wrapped fuse cord, fingers numb yet precise. Henri counted seconds in whispered French, each 12, 11, beating against Frank's ribs like a second heart. 3 Maquis riflemen covered the patrol path above. Their boots scraped quietly on slick timber. A lone German cigarette ember glowed through planks. Too close. Henri's hand clamped Frank's arm. They froze. Rain hissed. The ember drifted away. The riflemen exhaled in unison, and Frank knotted the final cord. 02:17. Henri signaled go. They slithered upslope, detonator leads trailing like serpents. Frank's breath crystallized in moon-pale puffs. He glanced back, wax-white fuse against iron, slick with rain but still burning. Atop the ridge, a Vickers team waited, barrel shrouded with burlap. Frank plunged the plunger. The earth convulsed. Steel screamed. Rivets became shrapnel, and the river leapt skyward, a geyser of black water and orange fire. Shockwave hurled him onto muddy grass. For seconds he heard nothing but his own pulse. Then distant German alarms, shouts, sporadic Schmeisser bursts, too late. The 21st Panzer's route lay severed by a yawning void. Henri grinned through grime. "Le pont chantera à l'aube," he shouted. "The bridge will sing at dawn." He pressed 7 francs into Frank's trembling glove. "Pour demain, so children wake free." Before Frank could answer, artillery lit the horizon. The Maquis scattered into hedgerows, and Frank sprinted toward a British flare shimmering beyond the fields. He never saw Henri again. Allied armor rolled inland while Bridge 17 smoldered behind them, its song a dirge of twisted steel that bought the landing beaches 4 precious hours. Each Valentine's Day after, Frank closed his shop at 4 p.m. sharp, counted the dents on those coins, and listened for echoes of that midnight chorus, until a silver-haired sister crossed an ocean to remind him that dawn still listens. Back in Birch Creek, Main Street sprouted banners overnight. "Welcome home, Frank." Coffee shop chalkboards offered Foxfire lattes, and the city council declared the first Monday in June Frank Miller Day. Local pride felt warm, but to Frank the fanfare droned like an idling engine with a loose timing chain, harmless until it rattled something vital loose. Reporters camped outside Miller's auto, eager to live-stream the hero's first day back on the job. Frank retreated inside, lowered the bay door, and busied himself rebuilding a cracked tractor manifold. The quiet didn't last. A polished sedan rolled up, plates from Washington, D.C. A man and woman in tailored suits stepped out, flashing Defense Department badges. The man spoke first, voice smooth as a dealership pitch. "Mr. Miller, Congress is considering a bill to honor overlooked World War II operatives. Your testimony could secure funding for a national memorial." The woman added, "Imagine school children touring an exhibit named after Foxfire 116. Frank wiped grease on a rag. "Exhibits name the fallen. I'm not fallen." He turned back to the tractor, conversation finished. That evening, Mark stopped by the shop clutching a science fair ribbon, first place for his scale model of Bridge 17. He'd printed Frank's field sketches on foam board, explaining fuse physics and structural weak points to wide-eyed classmates. "They never knew bridges could save lives," he said. Frank smiled, tension easing. Maybe being remembered didn't always cheapen truth, if memory passed through the right hands. But not every hand was careful. The BBC producer emailed a rough-cut documentary trailer titled The Quiet Saboteur. The footage glamorized explosions, inserted CGI flames, and shaved Henri's 7 francs down to a single symbolic coin. Frank's jaw clenched. He replied with one sentence. "Bridge 17 was a symphony, not fireworks. Play it true or don't play it." The producer countered, offering creative control and a 6-figure appearance fee. Frank deleted the email. That night, Elise called from Normandy. Her voice wavered between pride and worry. Tourist buses now clogged the village. Souvenir stands sold Bridge 17 dynamite candy. Henri's grave was suddenly a selfie backdrop. "Truth travels quicker than respect," she sighed. Frank stared at the neon service sign flickering outside. "Respect rides shotgun," he said. "We'll catch up." He drafted a letter to the French National Archives, gifting his field notebook with one condition. Pages would be digitized free for educators, never paywalled. If the world insisted on remembering, he'd at least ensure the memory stayed rust-free. 1 year later, Birch Creek High hosted its inaugural Stories of Service fair. Frank Miller slipped through the gym's side door, leaning on a cane he seldom used, unnoticed amid poster boards and popcorn machines. At center court stood Mark beside a new project, a working miniature of Bridge 17 linked to a Raspberry Pi. When a timer on the screen reached 0217, LEDs inside the trestles blinked, servo motors collapsed balsa spans, and a toy tank rerouted onto a delayed track. The audience gasped. Students erupted in cheers. Mark scanned the crowd, spotted Frank, and waved him forward. Frank shook his head, but Mark beckoned harder, the stubbornness of youth meeting the humility of age. Reluctantly, Frank shuffled onto the paint-scuffed hardwood. "This is the man who taught me bridges can save lives," Mark announced. Phones rose, ready to film. Frank coughed, sound bouncing off bleachers. "I've spent most of my life fixing things you notice only when they break," he began. "An engine, a tractor, sometimes a river crossing." He pointed to the model's shattered balsa. "Sometimes you have to break something to keep bigger things from breaking. That's not heroism, it's mechanics." He reached into his pocket, pulled out one of the melted francs, its edges jagged, burnished by decades of pocket sweat. "This coin bought a dawn," he said, pressing it into Mark's palm. Carry it to college. Lend it to anyone who thinks explosions are just noise. Let them feel the dents. Mark's eyes glistened. The gym fell so silent, even the popcorn machine paused. Afterward, Frank met Mark's parents by the trophy case. Papers changed hands. Deed transfer for Miller's auto. Sold for $1 and a binding clause. The neon service sign must never be replaced by digital. Mark's mother tried to protest, tears brimming. Frank waved her off. Shop needs young hands. I've got dawns left to watch. That night, Frank locked the garage one final time at 4 p.m., taped a handwritten note to the door. Closed for dawn maintenance. Back at first light, someone else's. He drove toward the sunset, dog tags clinking against the rearview mirror, the neon sign glowing behind him like a small, stubborn sunrise. The highway stretched flat and empty. Cicadas droned, a new symphony, not of war but of long-earned quiet. Frank loosened his grip on the wheel, letting cruise control hum. Somewhere, a turbine blade sliced Normandy air. Somewhere, an LED bridge collapsed for a class of ninth graders. And somewhere, perhaps in the hush between those places, a bridge still sang at dawn, its echoes carried by someone young enough to listen. Frank Miller never accepted the word hero. Heroes, he liked to say, are the names carved on stones by people who showed up after the noise stopped. He preferred mechanic, a person who senses a failing part and fixes it before the whole engine dies, whether that engine is a tractor clutch or the turning gears of a continent. When Normandy's bridge erupted, he wasn't chasing glory. He was tightening a bolt in history's axle so dawn could keep rolling forward. Now, 80-plus years later, the bolt holds. A bronze plaque gleams beside a peaceful river. School children run algorithms on toy bridges. A neon service sign flickers above a small-town garage leased to a new caretaker of stories. Frank's job is finally done, but he leaves behind instructions written in grease and fuse powder. Maintain the dawn, check the locks on silence, but open them when the next generation needs the blueprint. Spend the dents in those melted francs on curiosity, not souvenirs. Let history sing truth, not fireworks. And if you ever pull off a rural highway to find an aging man closing shop at exactly 4 o'clock, don't ask him why. Just watch the way he touches the door frame, a gentle pat, like a promise ratified. And listen. You might catch a faint chord beneath the cicadas, the echo of steel collapsing so dawn could stand. That sound is the interest Frank paid on a debt he never wrote, yet honored with every breath. The quiet oath that some bridges fall so others can rise, and some stories speak only after 8 decades of sturdy, deliberate silence.